England is absolutely jam-packed with football stadiums, but which are the 10 closest in the country? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Now, for the purposes of this video, I've measured the distance between stadiums in walking distance. If you were to walk between each stadium, how many miles would you cover? And in order for a stadium to qualify for this video, the club that plays there has to be currently playing in one of England's top 4 divisions. So for the purposes of this video, we won't be talking about non-league stadiums. If you're going to enjoy, make sure to drop a like. Without any further ado, let's jump in. Before we jump into the actual top 10, I thought I'd give some honourable mentions of stadiums that are just outside the top 10 in terms of proximity to one another. There's only 4.5 miles separating the Den where Millwall play and the Valley, home of Charlton Athletic. There's 4.3 miles between Arsenal and Spurs in London. 4.2 miles between Ashton Gate and the Memorial Stadium in Bristol. Only 4.1 miles separating Fulham and Brentford in London. And 3.8 miles separating Old Trafford and the Etihad in Manchester. But based on those distances, those sides just miss out on the top 10. So without any further ado, let's jump into the official top 10. And coming in 10th place, we've got Villa Park and the Hawthorns, home of Aston Villa and West Bromwich Albion. These two grounds are only separated by 3.7 miles if you were to walk from one stadium to the other. Now, what's interesting is both in the case of Aston Villa and West Brom, despite these two clubs being rivals and being really close to each other, neither club would consider the other as their most fierce rivals. Aston Villa obviously have the more historic and heated rivalry with Birmingham, and West Brom have their bigger rivalry with Wolves. Interestingly, in the case of West Brom though, they are a lot closer in proximity to Villa Park than they are Molineux. Coming in 9th place, we've got the distance between Loftus Road, home of Queen's Park Rangers, and the G-Tech, home of Brentford. Now, what's interesting about these two is that Brentford have actually moved closer to QPR since moving from Griffin Park to the G-Tech. When Brentford were playing at Griffin Park, there was about 4.2 miles that separated them from Loftus Road, but that distance has squeezed even closer since they've moved into their new stadium. A lot of football clubs in West London. It won't be the last time we speak about some of these sides on this video. As you're about to learn, QPR especially are close to a hell of a lot of other football stadiums. In fact, speaking of QPR, in 8th place, we've got the distance between Loftus Road and Stamford Bridge, which is also around about 3.4 miles. Pretty much the exact same distance separating QPR and Brentford is the distance between QPR and Chelsea. Now, it's not all too often that QPR and Chelsea have found themselves in the same league as one another. In the 21st century, they've only faced each other on 9 occasions. And generally speaking, it has been Chelsea who have had the edge over QPR, although QPR did win at Stamford Bridge not too long ago, back in January 2013, a 1-0 away win on that day. Chelsea would obviously say they're bigger rivals with the likes of Arsenal and Tottenham, but in terms of proximity, they're closer to QPR than some of those other London clubs. In 7th on this list, we've got the distance between Villa Park and St Andrews, two clubs based in Birmingham and only 3 miles to separate them. Obviously, a very historic rivalry between these two football clubs. There's not a lot of distance to separate them, and if you're born and raised in Birmingham, you tend to go one way or the other. You support Birmingham or you support Aston Villa. Now, myself, I'm still yet to do Villa Park as an away day, but I've been to St Andrews on quite a few occasions, and when driving into Birmingham, you do get the sense of how close these two grounds are to one another. You always go past Villa Park when you're going to St Andrews, or at least I've been in the direction that I've travelled to that ground. If you were to walk between those two stadiums, it would just take you over an hour. Not a lot to separate them in terms of distance. Coming in 6th place, and I promise this is the last time that QPR will feature on this list, but we've got the difference between Loftus Road and Craven Cottage, QPR and Fulham, with only 2.9 miles separating these two clubs in West London. Obviously, where QPR are situated in London, they just so happen to have a handful of other clubs who are right on their doorstep. If you grew up as a QPR fan in and around Loftus Road, you've got an abundance of other football stadiums which really are within walking distance. In the case of QPR especially, because you've got so many other London clubs that are so close close to you. I'd be interested to know from some fans in the comments down below, who do you personally regard as your most fierce rivals? Now in the case of Fulham, they do have a London club who is closer to them than QPR, but we'll speak about that later in the video. Coming in at the midway point of this list, we've got the difference between Bramall Lane and Hillsborough, with both clubs situated in Sheffield. It's Sheffield United and Sheffield Wednesday, with just 2.9 miles separating those two football stadiums. Obviously, a very historic rivalry between these two clubs, the Steel City Derby as it's known. Sheffield is an absolutely massive footballing city, and if you're born and raised in Sheffield, you go in one way or the other. You're a Blade or you're an Owl. In terms of where these two grounds are situated, it's definitely Bramall Lane that is closer to the actual city centre, with Hillsborough being a little bit more outside it. From Hillsborough to the city centre, you're looking at about a 50-minute walk, something like that. Whereas from Bramall Lane to the city centre, you're only looking at about a 15 to 20-minute walk. But regardless of that, both stadiums are located very close to one another. You can see why it's a very heated rivalry. Now coming in fourth on this list, it's the difference between Anfield and Everton's new Hill Dickinson Stadium. Everton have moved further away from Liverpool compared to when they were situated at Goodison Park. When Everton were playing at Goodison Park, and obviously Liverpool at Anfield, they were two of the closest football stadiums in English football. Based on this list, they would have been second on it. But since Everton have developed their new stadium on the docks, they have moved a little bit more away from their local neighbours. Don't get me wrong, there's still not much between the grounds, only 2.7 miles. But in terms of how closely they were situated previously, that is quite the jump in distance. Anfield to Goodison Park was literally a 15-minute walk across the park, whereas if you were to walk between Anfield and the new Hill Dickinson Stadium, that walk's going to take you about an hour or just less than that. Coming in third on our list, we've got the London Stadium, home of West Ham United, and Brisbane Road, home of Leyton Orient. Now what's interesting about these two is when West Ham were playing at Upton Park, there was significantly more distance between these two clubs. Brisbane Road to Upton Park is around about a 3.5 mile difference. However, from the London Stadium to Leyton Orient, that distance has shrunk to just 1.9 miles. Now it's interesting because when the Olympic Stadium, as it was formerly known, was built, there were a few different football clubs vying to take over that ground. West Ham obviously won that race in the end, but Leyton Orient were one of the clubs who were originally vying for that stadium and wanted to move in, obviously because of their close proximity to the ground. That didn't happen in the end though, and they've had to settle for West Ham being their close neighbours. In a competitive match, the two sides haven't played each other since 1987, despite being situated so close to one another. Coming in second on our list, and we're sticking in London, it's the distance between Stamford Bridge and Craven Cottage, with just 1.6 miles separating Chelsea and Fulham. If you were to walk the distance between these two stadiums, it would only take you around 35 to 37 minutes. In a car, it's just 10 minutes down the road from Stamford Bridge to Craven Cottage. These two sides are the closest of any clubs in London and the second closest in the country. I wouldn't say from the outside looking in that there's the most heated rivalry between Fulham and Chelsea. Maybe that's just me speaking as an ignorant northerner though. Obviously the two sides have clashed plenty of times in recent years, being in the Premier League. In terms of proximity, there is not much to separate those two clubs whatsoever. But as the closest stadiums in English football, of course it's the City Ground and Meadow Lane, home of Nottingham Forest and Notts County. Now in terms of walking the distance between these two stadiums, you obviously have to go up and around the bridge over the River Trent, but if you were to swim between these two stadiums, there's only 270 metres separating them. If you were to walk it, you do about 0.4 miles. There is literally just one body of water separating these two historic football clubs. Now myself as a North End fan, I've been to the City Ground on quite a few occasions. I've been to Nottingham Forest away as a North End fan. Never got the chance to go to Notts County, but I have been past the stadium because I've obviously been in Nottingham a few times. If I recall from my time in Nottingham as well, there is some good pubs on that side of the river where the Notts County ground is. Not been to the City Ground in a few years, but I remember being on that side of the River Trent and just not being let in any pubs around there because it was home fans only. But two very nice stadiums, two very historic football clubs. In terms of head-to-head matches, the two sides barely play each other in competitive fixtures. Since 1994, they've only had one head-to-head game with one another, and that was in August 2011. So despite being so close to one another in the country, they barely get the chance to play each other. But being said separated by just 270 metres in total. They're by far and away the closest stadiums in English football. But guys, that will now wrap it up for today's video. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to drop a like. If you'd like to see some more stadium videos coming out on the channel as well, make sure to show your support and leave any comments down below of any facts that you found interesting today. Apart from that though guys, thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.